The war between Iran and Israel continues to gather pace today as both sides have exchanged more missiles. This afternoon, Qatar, which is home to the biggest US military base in the Middle East, closed its airspace. Donald Trump insists the US inflicted what he calls monumental damage on Iran's main nuclear site. So where does this crisis go next and how might it end? Joining me now is our international affairs analyst, Rageh Omaar. Rageh, Israel has attacked the Fordow nuclear site again today. Kind of suggests that it's not finished business there. Do we have any accurate idea of how much damage has been inflicted?
No, we have satellite pictures, and that doesn't suggest much because Fordow is an incredibly protected site, and it's also the centerpiece of Iran's nuclear program. So how much has been damaged deep within the sort of bunkers and centrifuges, we don't know. We've got the say-so of the US administration, and we've got the say-so of Israel. And the fact that following the American airstrikes, there have been secondary airstrikes by Israel, as you said, suggests that this is not a finished issue.
We don't actually know for sure whether Iran had removed its centrifuges and nuclear material.
I'd be amazed if they didn't. I mean, this was a long telegraphed strike, right?
Yeah.
So Israel began this, weeks ago, followed up by the American strikes. I've been to Iran enough times to know that they knew what was coming. So they would have removed a lot of the most important technology that they have and whatever enriched fissile material that they had. Where that is gone, we'll never know. But I'd be amazed if they didn't.
Yeah, the point is you really do need to have boots on the ground to find out, and we're a long way away from perhaps possibly ever having that.
Well, clearly the Israelis do have boots on the ground, and they're not Israelis, and that's on record. These are Iranian agents who are opposed to the regime, who've been recruited by Mossad over 15 years, maybe more than that. So they will have boots on the ground, but not enough to know what Iran has done with a program that is vast. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Iran is a huge country, and there are multiple sort of sites. I'd be amazed if they didn't remove this material.
There are multiple Israeli targets as well. Today, we know the Israelis have attacked Evin prison mm-hmm. In the centre of Tehran. They've blown the front gate off. But, that's not a nuclear site, is it? What's going on here? What does that tell us?
Well, a lot of sites that have been struck by Israel are not nuclear sites. Actually, I'd argue that the majority have been non-nuclear sites. The cyber security building, Evin prison, as you sort of said, the Interior Ministry, all the key aspects of which the Iranian government has control of the country. And that sends a very different message.
Well, this is starting to look like the kind of attacks that you would take if you're interested in not destroying a nuclear and ballistic missile program, but in destroying the regime.
I think the two things go together. So what are the most precious things to the Iranian government? First of all, its ability to develop a nuclear program for civilian or military purposes. The other is the ability of the Iranian government to be in control of its country. Now, if you wanted to send a message to the Iranian leadership to say, which Donald Trump has done, there is a deal on the table here. You cannot continue to have a nuclear program that is not militarily focused. But Iran is in a very difficult position because it's a theocracy, and there is one supreme leader who makes all the decisions, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. So if you wanted to send a message to say, listen, if you want a deal, you have to come up with a different political program in which one person does not decide, but other people do. You would go after the nuclear program, and you'd go after very, very important political targets. And I think that's the message that's being sent. So it's a blend of targets.
That's intriguing stuff when you put it together with what Donald Trump said about if the regime can't make Iran great again, then maybe why not have a regime change?
Yeah. So it's not so much regime change, it's sort of regime shift.
Yeah, but it's not, nor is it megaphone diplomacy. This is like kind of missile diplomacy. This is...
Yeah.
I will talk about how this crisis might end, but I just want to talk also about what options Iran has at its disposal now. We talked at the beginning about this, about Qatar closing its airspace, which might suggest something. But what does the regime in Tehran now have on the table? Are any of the options appetizing?
I don't think it has a large amount of military options on the table in which it's able to inflict significant damage on Israel or US military bases in the region. And I think one of the most interesting things about the airstrikes that Israel conducted over the last 48 hours was in a province called Ahvaz, which is the southernmost province which faces towards Bahrain and Qatar. So the Bahrain and Qatar host the two largest US military sort of bases, and there were huge strikes. So the ability of Iran to be able to strike those key facilities, I think, has been, I go back to what I said, a degradation rather than an elimination of Iran's capabilities. Iran may strike US bases in Iraq, but they're sort of slightly empty. So to answer your point bluntly, not a lot of options.
What about the
economic ones?
A lot of analysts point, of course, to the Strait of Hormuz, and they know all this oil, all this liquefied gas goes through there. It's 20 miles wide at its narrowest.
Very narrow.
It's relatively straightforward, I read, for Iran to close it down. But the consequences for Iran are enormous, aren't they, for doing that?
Yeah, huge. If you have been attacked in the way Iran has done, why wouldn't they have done this earlier? That would be the most logical thing, right? We're under existential military threat. This is the biggest economic lever we have. Increasing oil prices for US gasoline payers and in the West would be the most obvious thing to do, to inflict economic pain. Why wouldn't you do that earlier, if you had the ability to do it?
Because it would come back and bite Iran badly, because China depends on all that Iranian oil and...
Or maybe it can't.
Or maybe it can't. Of course, when people look around the world for Iran's allies, they look straight away to Moscow. Iran's foreign minister is in Moscow today. Is he going to come back with any assurances of help from Vladimir Putin?
I don't think so, because even though Russia relies on Iranian drones in its war in Ukraine, and you've seen that for yourself on the ground in Ukraine, I don't think Russia will do anything. The problem, actually, is one thing that's quite amazing is that for the Iranian foreign minister, in order to fly back to Tehran, needs clearance from Israel, because Israel effectively controls Iranian airspace. So that tells you a lot, I think. So no, I don't think he will come back with much other than mutual support and friendship, and we feel your pain, but not anything practical.
It sounds like another humiliation for the Iranian regime. After a week of taking hit after hit, their foreign minister needs Israel's permission to fly to Russia. Do you see this crisis ending through the kind of diplomatic procedures which the UK and other European nations in particular have been pushing?
I think the European nations are, I wouldn't use the word irrelevant, but not decisive decision makers. There's only one person that counts in this, and he's called Donald Trump. And I think he's got a deal on the table. which is ironic because it was Donald Trump that pulled out of the JCPOA, which was the Iran nuclear deal, which had inspectors on the ground, that had cameras in Natanz, in Isfahan, in Fordow. He pulled out of it, and in order to correct that, he's gone to war, which is, I think, the greatest irony in all of this. So I want to do a deal with you. We had a deal where you pulled out, so we're going to bomb you in order to go back to a deal.
But, Donald Trump cannot afford, can he, for this to turn into another of America's forever wars, exactly the kind of conflict he says he's going to avoid. So he also needs a pretty quick resolution, doesn't he?
He does, but John, there's not going to be, and this is the key point for the Iranian leadership. They know there will not be another Iraq or another Afghanistan in which there are hundreds of thousands of Western troops. That's just not going to happen. So, in order to end this, you have to do a deal. But it depends on one man, and I think the message is, well, the Iranian leadership needs to come together and make a collective agreement, not one person's decision. I think that's the strategy.
In the end, do you think it'll be the Supreme Leader's decision, or do you think he'll have his mind made up for him, knowing what you know of the Iranian setup these days?
I think you put your finger on it earlier when you said this is, the aspect of Iranian humiliation is a galvanizing issue for Iran, even those who oppose the regime. Iran has 5,000 years of recorded history. It's not invaded any country. It's been invaded multiple times. It's been surrounded by adversaries in Iraq, through Saddam Hussein, the West, in Afghanistan, etc., etc. I think it will be very, very difficult, and I think that's the miscalculation that Israel and the US will make, is to humiliate Iran to a place whereby it actually galvanizes support for the government, which is not what it wants to do. So I think it's very tricky to call, but I think that there is a deal on the table from the Americans. I don't think it's acceptable to the current leadership because it's dependent on the say-so of the Supreme Leader. But let's say if he was replaced somehow by assassination or anything else, and that's what...
or a big bunker buster bomb from the Israelis.
Well, that's been put on the table. Yeah. I mean, the most charismatic Iranian-sponsored leader in the Middle East was Hassan Nasrallah, who was the head of Hezbollah, and he was killed. So I don't put it beyond bounds that might be on the agenda of the US and Israel. But if it does that, if it sort of goes after the supreme leader of Iran, I think all bets are off the table.
So it's more likely to end with a bang with enormous consequences rather than the sort of the last whimpering of this regime, is what you're saying? I
think that's right.
Rageh, while we've been talking, there have been US media reports of Iranian missiles apparently fired at US bases in Qatar. What can we make of that?
Well, Al Udeid Air Base is one of the most important military assets that the US has in the entire Gulf. And it's surprising and shocking in many ways because Qatar is not an ally, but is the closest Gulf nation to Iran. So it's a huge facility. I've been there several times. All of the major strikes that the US has made in Iraq, even the killing of Qasem Soleimani, who was the head of the Quds force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, was directed out of Al Udeid. So I think that this shows that Iran is going to go after the most important aspects of US power in the Gulf. It's fired missiles into Tel Aviv and elsewhere. But this is an escalation.
I was going to say, we don't yet know the scale of the attack, whether it's been a success, but potentially this is a very big move by Iran.
Huge.
Rageh, obviously it's a situation that continues to develop. Thanks very much for your time.
No problem. Thank you, John.